welcome everybody. Hi, everybody. Please feel free to turn on your video. We really appreciate this to be more of a, a conversation feel, and do jump in at any time with questions or comments if you have any. So this evening, I want to welcome Lucette Van Someren Boyd, and I'll get you to introduce yourself and maybe start with your Montessori story, Lucette. How did you come
How did I
across
get into
Montessori?
Montessori? Well, actually, I just had my first daughter and I was at St. George Hospital and they brought around a magazine called Parenting. And I read the magazine while I was waiting to have somebody show me how to breastfeed for the first time. And it had an article in Montessori on Montessori in there, and these children were like peeling carrots in the pictures and things. And I thought my mother would never let me in the kitchen. That's where I'm going to send this child to school. So for a couple of years, I hunted around until I found a Montessori school. And then I found one at Beverly Hills, Naui, I think it was. And I enrolled Claire there, and she went like the day she turned 3. So that's how I started that on that journey. And then after, I think 4 of them were in Montessori, and we've moved to Southside, an opportunity came up because the training started again in 1998 or 9. And I went to a couple of little orientations and thought it's a bit of a change from nursing, but I was getting a little bit burnt out working in intensive care and seeing a lot of young people trying to take their own lives. And I thought maybe if you got in at the other end, you might be able to save a couple of those people. So, yeah, I just enrolled and started. And is that as far as you want me to go?
Go on. What happened then?
Oh, okay. So then, so I did my training with Shannon Helfrich, had a few interesting jobs because all the people that were still working had not moved out of their roles. So most of us that were training who didn't or weren't sponsored by a school was sort of job hunting for quite some time. So I worked at the Hills in the mornings, and another friend did the afternoon because there were 2 3-hour sessions there. I worked at Wollongong, Elanera. I worked at, where else did I work? Montessori East. I started at Montessori East for a period of time, and during that stage I started doing my Masters in Special Education because while my older children were at school and had learning difficulties like dyslexia and autism, I didn't think they were getting they weren't getting the help that they needed, and I had to seek that outside the school. And I found out, like most teachers, that Montessori teachers at the time weren't trained in that area. So I did my Masters in Special Ed, and then they sort of changed the rules and said you had to have an undergraduate degree, so I went back and got my degree in early childhood. And before that I was a nurse and I went back and did my postgraduate child and family health nursing because I thought that all tied in nicely together. And I did a Steiner postgraduate degree in extra lesson, which is their special ed. I trained in brain gym and became a consultant in that. And I brought as much movement to the classroom as I possibly could. And in 2008, I opened my first school, which was at Monterey, which I just sold last year. And I think 2011, 12, 13, I opened other schools and did my best to bring a lot more movement into those classrooms and bring in brain gym, extra lesson and everything that I could, because I think a lot of the movement in Montessori is restricted by the physical dimensions of the building these days. Like if you look at a lot of the old pictures of what was going on, the children went inside and outside, and ours are restricted to the inside. And we have this amazing invention called the veranda where a lot of wet activities happen, but they can't just freely walk in and out in a lot of places. Of course, some they can. So I thought bringing more art and more movement through, like, I don't use eurythmy, but I know about it, and some of the extra lesson movements are really good for games with the children. to get them able to have a bit more movement before they start the work cycle. And I think that really helps settle people down and help build the level of concentration. So,
so Lucette, you were AMI trained, are AMI trained. Isn't it a bit frowned upon to bring in outside programs like Brain Gym into the classroom? I mean, doesn't Montessori serve all children, you know, at any level, if you just do the program as it's taught?
That's what I thought too. And I kept sitting back and doing the program and watching and thinking, this is great if we're just consistent and we do everything we've been taught. But then I found after a few years that there were always those little outliers that didn't quite fit into the middle of that bell's curve. So I started looking at what I could do to help those children. And I found, you know, you could extend things. So some things like, for example, and most people probably do this, you know, if it's Easter, you would have the cards and counters, but you might have some chickens in a basket or something as well, just to extend that interest in learning. And some people don't do that, and that's their choice, but the children seem to like that. But even with those extensions, children walking on the maze with the red rods, various other things, we still miss children. And I found a lot of children had difficulty with moving. They were always crashing into the same obstacles every day. They had, you know, poor coordination. They didn't know where their feet were, maybe from being in walkers, maybe from being in strollers, maybe just the way their brain was developing, hearing issues. So I started bringing in more things like that, which, I don't know, I feel like if Dr. Montessori was alive, she'd be doing a little bit more research and bringing things into the program, because that's what she was always doing when she was alive. And I'm not comparing myself to her in any way, but we can't just restrict ourselves to what's in our albums, because the children are different today than they were in 1907, because they're exposed to a lot more at a much earlier age. Brain development's different. There's a lot of screen time that people have. Children aren't getting as much movement outside school. And I think
Isn't there research that puberty is coming on earlier?
Puberty is coming on earlier, and also puberty often happens because of the weight, the mass of the child. So we are putting on weight as well. So nations with heavier, if you've got a heavier child, they'll usually reach puberty in an earlier age. Not always, but pretty much. So that makes a difference as well. But I just found that the use of all these things in the classroom worked so well that, and I actually set up a learning centre in 2000 and maybe 2003 outside of Montessori. I'd go to the hills in the morning and do my 3-hour work cycle, 4 hours we were there, and come home, and then I'd see children before and after school, and I'd use Spalding, Lindemood, visualising and verbalising. I'd use the maths program. I'd use Brain Gym. I started bringing in things from Extra Lesson, Move to Learn programs, which I was involved in as well, art therapy. And I started doing that. And what I was doing, I've since found out, was pretty much Montessori therapy. And that's what I've been doing this year. I've been to Germany. I've started the program here online, and then I went to Germany for 2 weeks to do the face-to-face component of that. So in Germany, in all children's hospitals, there's actually a Montessori therapist who has her or his own rooms, as well as a physiotherapist, occupational therapist, speech pathologist, and a Montessori therapist. And so we went over and worked in the Kinderzentrum, like the children's hospital there, and in centres where it's happening outside the hospital will be a learning centre, and learn how to do that, because I think that's my next step in life. You know, and I'd like to be able to go into schools and show some of this work to some of those schools, because I think their special needs departments would be able to use this really well with some of the children.
Can you tell us more about MMPI?
So MMPI, so I met Catherine Massey in 2013, maybe 2011, whenever Educateurs Sans Frontières was in Texas, I think 2011. And we accidentally arrived a whole day early together. and we started chatting. We had so much in common, and we both had our masters in special ed and were working in that area. She's 6 to 12 trained from Bergamo, and so we had that. It was different, but we sort of were in the same wavelength. And so we spent the whole of educateurs, well, doing all the things you were supposed to do and looking at the readings and what we could do. And then we spent a lot of it working out ways we could take that forward into the community. But she brought lots of videos from Acti and Sundenschein of the work in Germany, the work with Dr. Hellbrugger, who was Vice President of AMI when Mario Montessori was president, and how that spread through Germany, and how like all the countries behind the Iron Curtain use Montessori therapy or Montessori medical pedagogy, which was actually what Montessori herself started with, the Montessori medical pedagogy and all the sensory programs that were influenced by Sagan. And yeah, so she and Barbara Laborski, who's an OT out of America, founded Montessori medical pedagogy for inclusion in probably about 4 years ago now. And myself and Michelle Lane, who's a specialist in ABA combined with Montessori, and who got the Teachers Award, the Premier's Award in Canada for that work. Joyce Pickering, who is only just recently, in the last couple of years, stepped down as president of AMS in America, who's has a PhD in speech pathology and ran the Shelton School, which is a 850-place school for children with language learning difficulties in Dallas. And a few other people, Professor Dutke, Joachim Dutke, who runs the Hellbrugger Foundation in Germany, who runs special ed courses over there, myself, an advocate, and we're all on the board for MMPI. MMPI's decided fairly recently that we won't affiliate with any other organisation, even though we have AMS, AMI and other trained Montessorians on the board and within the group, I guess, the smaller groups. We don't want to be controlled by any of those overriding entities. We don't want to be, having to follow AMI lines, AMS lines, or any of the others. We just want to be there for the child. We want to be there to help teachers in the classroom access information on how they can help children with special needs, or what we would call learning differences within the classroom.
Has there been any attempt to control or edit what MMPI does by any of these organisations, or any pushback from?
Well,
pushback from bringing in things like brain gym?
There has been some pushback. But we've also had people like David Kahn within AMI, who's been very supportive of our work, but a little bit further up, hasn't been support, because I think some of these larger organisations are trying to bring in their own special needs courses, perhaps, and so this might have been seen as a bit of a threat. But we're not running the same courses they are. We're running short courses that are there. In fact, if anybody's interested, I don't know how many people are listening, but if anybody's interested, this month there's a course called Understanding, so I've got to put my glasses on, where are they? So Understanding Montessori Interventions and Therapies, and that's starting this weekend. But if we had enough people, it's late at night because it's in America. By the time you age of 14 hours, it becomes some ridiculous time in the middle of the night. But if we had enough people, and that only has to be 10, I've got a few. If anybody's interested in that, please contact me, or contact Mark, and he can get you in touch with me. And we'll be able to run an asynchronous course from there. It's got Loyola points, no NISA points or any other states points, but there are credits from Loyola, so it is a good course. There's a few people from here that have done it. So the first month will be just 2 2-hour sessions, plus there's an assignment and a lot of videos that you can watch, which are really helpful, going into a lot of the movement. That's given by Barbara Laborski, who's a paediatric OT. The second month will be Catherine Massey, who's looking at Orton Gillingham, which is a gold standard in literacy training for kids with dyslexia and other language learning difficulties. Same deal, 1 month with Catherine, Katie, implementing that. And these are talking about integrating these into your classroom, into the language program. And then last month is with Michelle Lane, who's really, I think, the world specialist in ABA and Montessori together. And she'll be going through how you can help children with autism in the classroom. So if anybody wants to get in touch with me, it starts next week, but we can have a later start if anybody would like to do that. And they're also doing a course for administrators next month, which they've usually run out of Germany, and the Hellbrugger Foundation's involved in that. It's got about 58 credit points with Loyola as well for any administrators who want to start a truly inclusive school. So they're the sort of courses that we're doing, very practical courses.
Is there a book you think all educators should read to educate themselves about special needs?
Yeah, well, I think the best one would be the one by Joyce Pickering, because she's had probably 50 or 60 years, she's in her 80s now, of work and experience with children with language issues. So it's called Montessori Strategies for Children with Learning Differences, and you can pick it up on Amazon Prime. I'm not sure what the price is now, but that's a really good book. It goes through lots of different areas that you can look at, and there's also a chapter in there by Michelle Lane about helping children with autism settle into the classroom. And Joyce, the school that Joyce runs, does have 850 students, and she was head of that for many, many years, so has lots of experience. And her husband, Bob, who's unfortunately just passed away, was the first school inspector who opened the first public school Montessori in America. So they've got a long history with Montessori and implementing into the education system in America, and lots of experience. And she's just a lovely lady. I'd suggest a Steel Magnolia and gives great lectures. She's been to Australia. I think she came to Perth a few years ago to speak about language learning difficulties, and was a great success. So that's a great book. And otherwise, if you can get a hold of Seguin, however you want to pronounce it, his book that Montessori was influenced by, that's got a lot of things in there, like a lot of the boards and the sensory items that we use in our classroom are all designed by him. And then Mario Montessori brought those in as well. So.
Can you talk a bit about Brain Gym? What does it add to, what does it add of value, do you think, that's important, that's not in the Montessori curriculum?
I don't know if it adds anything that's not in the curriculum, but it would enhance it. It's a bit like using Makaton or keyword sign to enhance language for children that can't speak properly. It gives them a way of communicating until their own language develops. I think Brain Gym teaches a range of movements that they might not otherwise use, and then that's integrated into their movement system. It also encourages a lot of midline movements and crossing to help develop the corpus callosum. And I think it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. And it goes back to basic movements. It works with, first of all, reaching out, then unilateral, then contralateral. So it goes through the normal phases of development that we would normally see a child go through. And let's face it, some of them miss them. A lot of the bottom scooters and people that didn't crawl often have issues with their language. And it's been proven over and over again that a lot of cultures that don't go on the ground, like the New Guineans, tribes who carry their children in case the snakes get them, or the Eskimos who carry their children so they don't freeze to death, actually don't have a written language. So a lot of the movements a lot of those children don't crawl and don't get that contralateral movement and don't have those areas of the brain developed. And if they don't get it at a certain age and are exposed to that, they'll miss out a bit. So Brain Gym brings all that in. And guess what? If you read the book, or you look at the videos, it's free. It doesn't cost anything to bring that into the classroom unless you want to buy the little cards that the children can put on the shelf with a mat. They can go and get the cards out whenever they want to. It's a little bit like doing yoga, but just a bit more directed.
You opened several early childhood centres in Sydney.
Yeah.
What are some of the challenges here? Were they long day care?
Long day care, yeah. The first one we opened didn't have any children there. There were a few, but it took me about 3 months to um, address issues with the building itself and then set up the Montessori materials and furniture in there. And then start with no children. So that was easier than buying a centre that's already set up and using a different philosophy. And the bank didn't want to lend me any money because they said it was in the middle of the GFC and we'll never do very well, but we were full pretty much within 6 months. We had issues that everybody does with the neighbours and things like that, but we got over that because we're only open 8 till 4. And with an 8 to 4 centre, it was interesting for me because when I'd worked in other places, we always had the children there 5 days a week. So I wasn't really sure how it would work with having children maybe, so 2 days a week. So you could either do Monday, Tuesday or Thursday, Friday. They had to be consecutive days. Or you could do the full week, or you could add the Wednesday to either end of the week. And then eventually we had children doing Monday, Tuesday and Thursday, Friday because the parents just wanted to spend a day with them. And I just didn't know how the program would work, especially as they got older with numeracy and literacy, if they were only there 2 days a week. But it worked just fine. I was really surprised by how well it did work. And I guess we also took 2 to 5-year-olds rather than 3 to 6-year-olds. And my own issue was that I tended to bring things in a little bit earlier than I should have. And then I realised what I was doing and had to, be a bit metacognitive about what I was expecting to happen. And of course, you'll get those children that are, a little bit advanced or a little bit longer to take things in. But that was an issue for me. The other issue was that because we're a long daycare centre, a lot of people didn't go there just because it was Montessori. Whereas if you're in a Montessori school, they'll come to you for that, and that's what I was used to. So I had to really work hard on education of the parents. We had some parents who knew about Montessori who come from other schools, and the long day care hours suited them. So we set them up as mentors to some of the other parents who were just starting. We paired people up. We had one evening a month initially. So we'd have so over the 10 months, leaving out January and December. In December, we used for an orientation for the children coming in the following year. So from February, we'd have like an overview of the Montessori curriculum. And then in March, we'd have a discussion night with the parents about that. And then the following month, we'd have an overview of language. And then the following month, we'd have a discussion. And that took us 10 months to go through. And so we slowly educated the parents. And eventually, every parent would come to our sessions. There were people sitting out in the playground trying to listen to what we were saying. And I also had nights those first couple of years where I invited friends of my children themselves and other Montessori graduates to talk about their experience with Montessori and what they'd gone on to do, because that's what I'd experienced in other schools. So I thought, why not do that in a long daycare centre, because these parents deserve that just as much as any other centre. And I did home visits. I learned that from Pam Staten. I just started going out at Montessori East when they started enrolling children, and I'd do a home visit with the children before they started. And it's amazing what you learn about a child from just spending half an hour to an hour in their home. So I started doing that with the enrolments at Monterey as well. So I got to know the parents, and that was really helpful for us to build a community, because that's actually what we're doing. We're building communities. We're not just educating children.
Did you notice differences in the graduates of your centres that were 5-day versus the long day care that weren't 5-day?
Well, yeah, I did. They were a little bit, like, generally speaking, the people that had been there 5 days a week would be further advanced with their literacy, numeracy. They'd be, the development of the will was probably stronger, and they probably had a bit more what I'd call grit or resilience. And I think they felt that they owned the classroom a little bit more than the children that were only coming 2 days. And I have to say, with some of those children that came 2 days, that some of those parents had been at another centre and they hung on to 2 days or something still at the other centre and came to us. And some of them eventually let go of those other 2 days, but they were just not sure about what this Montessori was about. So that can cause issues too, because they're running around a bit more in other centres. They don't sit down and develop concentration to the same extent, and then they would have to basically swap their behaviour when they came to us. So, I mean, just required a lot more grace and courtesy lessons than some other children did. And then, of course, you don't know with the families themselves, being families that aren't choosing Montessori and maybe not implementing that in their own homes, how that would be, because a lot of the children that came 5 days a week did come from schools that had sought us, so from families who had sought us out because we're offering Montessori. So I don't know really what the answer to that is, because there's a few different influences on that.
What advice would you give to an inexperienced young teacher or center director these days about implementing Montessori with
In long day care or in general? In long day care or in general?
In general, yeah, either.
I think the first thing that you have to do is just sit back and watch. Like, don't rush in. Sit back and watch the children. Spend a couple of days every week just watching your children, and then not try and rush your relationships with the children, because the children do things because of their relationship with you initially, and you have to make that child feel safe. Once the child feels safe, and some of that might require that you would just play games or sit and talk to that child or just read them a book or just develop a nice little relationship, sit in the sandpit, whatever, and then eventually that child will want to do other things. But if you just try and push them into, sorry, my screen's disappeared. If you just want to push them into working straight away, then that'll be a totally different relationship. I've seen people come into classrooms where I've been, over the years when I've done casual work. I've seen a little child come in, and the first day they're there, someone tries to teach them sandpaper letters, and the child doesn't even know where they are yet, doesn't understand what people are talking about, doesn't know where mummy is, and somebody's sitting them down. They're never going to learn it, unless they're a very unusual child. So relax. That's it. Relax and have fun. I think that's what it would be. And enjoy the children.
Establish that trust, that relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And get to know your staff, support your staff, and look at what each of your staff's gifts are, and encourage them to bring those into the classroom.
What do you see as the biggest challenges faced by Montessori in Australia?
We don't have enough Montessori trained teachers, and I don't know where they're supposed to come from. Like, personally, I've had ads in for 2 schools now offering a lot more money and even training, and I'm just getting no one. And I've talked to other people, they can't get staff. Everybody that says Montessori at the moment doesn't have a Montessori teacher. Some people do, but a lot of people don't have Montessori staff at the moment. They just can't get anybody. A lot of people are trying to train their own staff. It's just really difficult to get training. And I think we rely too much on certain training groups, and some do put more effort into than others, but any training that's following the philosophy at the moment would be better than what we've got, which is pretty much nothing. I mean, at the moment, literally now, today, there's probably a couple of things running, but the numbers are limited and nobody can get staff. And you really do need at least one trained staff.
Yeah. So, but why is it so hard to get Montessori teachers these days if there is demand? And we've had what 107 years of Montessori in Australia. Why is it so hard to find trained teachers?
I don't think anybody knows what Montessori is, or that maybe some people think it's a lot of extra work, because whichever system you're in at the moment, there's a lot of documentation and a lot of work to do. And maybe this is just one more thing to do, one more lot of study that maybe people don't want to do. But I think most people really don't know exactly what Montessori is, or think it's very strange, and it's very hard. Like even now, if I get casuals in, it takes me at least a full week to even get through to them, to step back before they go to help that child, to just step back, count to 10, watch the child, and by then they've probably done whatever it is you're about to go and do for them. But even that simple idea is really hard to get through to people who've been in a traditional preschool. And so they just, a lot of them think we're very strange. You know, why aren't you helping the child? Why aren't you doing that for the child? Why are you speaking quietly? Why are you letting that child? Why aren't you going and talking to that child who's working at the desk there so quietly? There must be something wrong with them. We better go up and chat to them. Like, that's a really hard concept. So I think people just don't know what it is. It's not out there. It's not, mind you, I don't know if anybody that signs up for teaching ever knows what that is, really.
But why do you think Montessorians as a movement, why are we having such
I
a
think we're too
hard
busy
time
arguing
selling?
with each other,
Right.
Mark.
Yeah.
Too many
Too
politics,
busy
Mark.
what?
Politics, too much
Say
politics.
more.
I just think
What do you mean?
I'm a little bit out of that realm at the moment, but I know that like there's too many different groups trying, like at the moment, from what I can gather, there's two main groups in Australia that, like, I remember when we had two groups years ago and the government said that they wouldn't listen to us until we could come to them with one voice. And I don't think we've moved forward from that. And I know in America there was a big, political thing between AMI and AMS, which continues to this day, and it'll be the same here. And yet here we are, education for peace, and we can't even get on with each other. So what does that say to other people? If we can't walk the talk, do we really mean what we say we do about all the other things we do if we can't even get that right? So, and that's our main thing.
How do we change this?
We lose our egos.
Mm.
I think we have to lose our egos and think about the child, like who's actually working for the child, who's actually working to promote Montessori. Does Montessori have to be promoted a certain way, or is it about the child? Does it have to be one group or another? I can't understand why we can't all be in this together. Like, isn't that what it's about? Is how can we be promoting peace if we're not peaceful ourselves? And yeah, we have to let go of our egos. But that's just
So
my
it's
opinion.
really about transformation of the teacher, but not just transformation in terms of working with the child, but transformation of the teacher in terms of their whole life, bringing that same wisdom to everything we do in our
Yeah,
whole life.
that's right. Like, I was just watching something about people who live to over 100, and most of them, I mean, their diet's better in these little pockets of the world, but the one thing they kept coming up with was that they lived pretty much lives without stress, that their stress levels were so low, the whole communities with low stress levels. And I thought, it's stressful being in the classroom sometimes because you've got, children here and children there, and you've got to keep an eye that someone over there with the scissors isn't cutting off someone else's hair, and that someone's not, putting one of the little pencils in someone's eye, or, all those little things, or they're not in the toilet weeing on the floor or whatever. But so it gets a bit stressful that way sometimes, but you just have to laugh. You just have to laugh at yourself and at the kids. Like, if you don't laugh every day and if you take yourself too seriously, you end up not enjoying what you're doing, fighting with other people, not being very kind, and not being a very good role model for the children. I mean, you just have to relax a little, don't you?
What do you think's the secret of transformation of the teacher? What has been the secret in your life for that? Like this unfortunate thing about
Old
operating out
age,
of the
Mark,
ego
old age.
is you old age.
Old age. No, but I think unless you have some epiphany, or that you're doing a lot of reading and inculcating a lot of those ideas into your life, because none of us live perfect lives and none of us have perfect classrooms. We can strive for it, but I'm not sure that we all know what we're even aiming for sometimes. I think we have to really be so metacognitive and really aware of ourselves and our movements and how we speak and how we deal with other people in order to move forward and bring that into our lives. And we're not just role models for the children, we're role models for each other. And I think as I've got older, things have become more apparent. And, you know, as a parent, you're always trying to teach your children things and they don't want to know. They've got to discover them for themselves. And I think that's the same with every teacher. Every teacher has to discover why she's there, what it is that she wants to do and how she wants to go about it, and think about how she's going about that, what effect that will have on the people around her or him.
How do you think we can encourage that transformation, that kind of maturity in new teachers during training? Like when you're operating out of the ego, it's really hard to see that you're in your ego, right? And so it's really confronting to be told that you're in your ego by somebody else. So how do we encourage that transformation in new trainees?
Personally, I try and behave like I try not to say anything about what someone's doing except maybe stand back and watch. And I'll give each new person a day or two and I say to them, just sit there and watch the classroom. I don't know. I think, just ask me that
So
question
modeling.
again.
It sounds like you're saying modeling is the way,
Yeah,
the
like
best
it's
way to that.
it's that, but I think you've got to be aware that you're trying to model things and you hope that people will grasp the idea from watching what you do. And then some people don't. And then you have to think of a way to say things to them without upsetting them or without sounding like you're dictating things. I always say, oh, in our philosophy, rather than I would like you to, because it is really in our philosophy. Like sometimes I'll have to say to someone, like, within our philosophy, you know, we don't interrupt the children. We're hoping that they'll find concentration by you not going and sitting down and going, or talking to them about gratuitous praise. Like I have people that come in and they're casuals and they're there clapping the child because they put a pencil back. Good girl, you put the pencil back. And I sort of have to explain to them that that's not really a good idea, and that are we going to clap them for sitting nicely? Are we going to be clapping them for breathing? Great girl, you're breathing so well. Like, where does that stop? And explain to them, you know, to let the child experience their own joy and their own movements and their own successes and all of that. So some things you have to explain to people, and just basic things like that, because that's the main thing that people come in with, this praise. I'm sorry, my cat's jumping around there making a lot of noise. So yeah, role modeling's the way I usually try and moderate the classroom. And even with staff, if you're stopping and doing grace and courtesy lessons with the children and teaching them to walk slowly, then I hope that the staff, or the educators now, will listen to that and slow down their movements and think about how much rushing around the room they do, and just, you know, take it easy. So
Can Montessori save the world? Do you still have hope
can
after the
Montessori
things
save the world? I hope so. I hope if we can get enough people involved in Montessori and enough children educated in Montessori using Montessori methods, then it would be nice to think that we could have that peace. But at the moment, as you said before, I don't know that we're being very good role models for that, if we are talking about peace. Like even with some of the things that you might implement in the classroom for children with special needs, some people are very upset about that because they do believe that everything we need is in the curriculum and everything is in the materials, but actually for some children it's not. And we have to put our ego aside and say, what can I do to help that child? You know, and we'll present it in a Montessori way. We can put things on trays. We can approach it in a certain way, you know, giving the child a little bit of challenge, but a good chance of success, all of those things. But sometimes those children, and some children, having said we shouldn't praise, some children might need a little bit of praise to start with if they've got some issues, or, you know, we have a lot of foster children now with a lot of issues, and the trauma that's involved in that, those children need a lot of extra attention. And so we've got a lot of children that we have to work with from all sorts of backgrounds to get to a certain level before we can save the world.
Yeah, we say in positive discipline that praise is kind of like ice cream, you know, or treats. We don't want to scare you off from ever having any, but it should be, you know, once in a while treat, not
Yeah.
a daily staple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'll praise them in a, like I'll be saying to them, wow, you've done so much work there. Look at that. And which is your favourite colour? And, you know, oh, you've written all these A's. Which one's your favourite one? Or which one are you happiest? So I'm acknowledging that the work that they've done, not always, they don't always need it. But, you know, if they bring it over to me, then they're the sort of things I would say to them. I really like that one, or, you know, like that sort of,
Encouragement rather than praise.
yeah, and validation of the work that they've done.
Yeah. Lucette, where do you think Montessori fits within the public system, public education?
I wish it was in every school, Mark. I wish it was in every school. I remember working out once that if we had classrooms, considering they were going to be 3 years, if every parent paid $1,000, and if there were 8 new families to 10 new families coming in every year, that'd be $8,000 to $10,000 worth of replacement materials and things that we could get into that class every year, and that will keep everything going nicely, and then they just move on. And it was, again, it's really a matter of where do you find the teachers? And at the time, I think it was where do you find the teachers that have a degree as well as Montessori training to be allowed to work in the system. But it would be so good if, like in say the Netherlands, where they have Steiner or Montessori or traditional or Catholic, you know, like there's Catholic, Lutheran, traditional schools, Montessori and Steiner, and I think that's sort of dying out a little bit over there now. But my friend Josie Ludwig said that in her family, like a couple of them went to Montessori, a couple of them went to Steiner. It just depended on that child and how they fitted in, and they had that choice. Or they would call it Waldorf, of course. But the fact that the parents can choose either or for their child is just such a gift. And
You're
they know
quite
their children
familiar.
better than us.
Yeah, you're quite familiar with some of the other alternative education methods. So you've done. I know you've done a little bit of Steiner training, and your father-in-law was a student of A.S. Neil.
Yeah,
What
my
do you think
father-in-law was,
Montessori?
sorry, my father-in-law was the first student of A.S. Neil in Summerhill.
What do you think Montessori can learn from Steiner and democratic education and other alternative systems?
Well, I think they've already learnt from each other that they all follow the path of development of the child and they all treat the child with respect. They just do it in a slightly different way. But I remember when I started my extra lesson training in Sydney with this Waldorf Steiner program, that people were like, you're a Montessori teacher, why are you here? You know, you don't do this, that and the other. I said, I'd like to find the similarities. And I'm sure if we look for the similarities, we could base a really good relationship on that. And I'd like to learn a bit more about the art therapy and the movement to bring it into my classroom for some of these children that need a little bit extra, and just the art generally. Like that's an area that I don't think we've developed, and I'm sure it would have been developed along a period of time if Marie Montessori had lived longer, or, you know, it would have been more interested in that area. But she did do a lot with the classics. There were all those, you know, lessons where we teach children about different art, but I don't think we spend a lot of time doing things like wet on wet paintings and that. And I suppose these days, when you've got to follow the EYLF as well, there's more opportunity for us to develop a little bit more of that. I think the Sudbury School also is based on the Democratic School, which was Steiner, sort of A.S. Neil. And the Sudbury School would have, and there's quite a few of those in America, and there was one, in fact, we owned it. It was up in Queensland and someone else ran it. My husband and I had that for a few years, and it was run by a wonderful couple, the Shepherds, and we just owned the land, not the school. And we sent our son there for a while, our oldest son, and they had a democratic system. They'd have a meeting with the students and discuss various, issues that had happened with behaviour and, who was going to look after the animals and what work had to be done. And I found that when I sent my children to the Hershey Farm School in America, that they would have the same discussions, which are all based on A.S. Neil's school that he had. So...
did A.S. Neil and Montessori have any connection? Did they know of each other?
They used to write to each other. I've got copies of letters here, and there's a couple of things in a couple of the books in the Domini series, and they all wrote to each other at various stages. But A.S. Neil, some of the things she was doing, he didn't agree with. So my father-in-law said that, the children would come to the school and they'd be just free to do it. By the time I got to England, as it started in Germany, I went through France and eventually ended up in England. And he said that some of the children that would come there would, be from quite wealthy families and some other interesting sort of vagabonds that would come in. And he said at first they just play outside for 6 months, sometimes 18 months. They just climb trees and play. And then they'd come in and they go, "Can you teach me maths?" And they do the whole 6-year curriculum in 2 months. Because they got everything they wanted to out of all the movement, and they just thought, "Oh, I think I'll go and do that now." So there's different ways. I guess each child's a little bit different, and who knows what they were learning when they were hanging off those trees and making mud pies and doing all those things outside, or listening to their friends who were having lessons and going to those meetings every Friday. And I'm not sure I answered your question there.
Yeah, you did. What did Montessori think about, from those letters, what did Montessori think about Summerhill?
I'm not sure, actually. It was more, I think she thought it was an interesting experiment. I think the children are a little bit too free. And I think A.S. Neil thought that Montessori children were a bit too restricted, because I don't think they quite understood each other's way of doing things. And Steiner has
Say again?
And Steiner has a totally different way of doing things. They have 144 lessons over 12 years, and each lesson lasts 3 weeks, and it's a different way of doing things entirely, and mostly group work. But they do have a lot of art.
We have, in our upcoming conference in Sydney in end of October, we have a speaker from Steiner who's going to talk about transformation of the teacher from the Steiner perspective, and also one from democratic schools in Australia, and they're going to talk about that question from the democratic Summerhill perspective. So it'll be interesting to hear, and then we'll have a panel at the end of the conference to talk about the similarities and differences between these alternative approaches.
Yeah, and they do have a lot in common. And there's a bit of a crossover there at around puberty or around high school age, where we do a lot of things the same.
Does anybody have a question or a comment for Lucette?
I feel that Lucette is a living legend in Montessori terms. And I think someone needs to nominate her with that Montessori legend thing that they were looking for the conference, because I think your wisdom, your attitude, your setting up, putting everything on the line is phenomenal. And I know that you've balanced your family and all sorts of things, Lucette. So I just feel all the children that have touched you and been through your school are certainly the better off. And it's a pity we can't clone you, because we just need so many more of you.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind of you. I'm really flattered, but that's very nice. And I hope.
Lucette, have you figured out the key to the work-life balance question that plagues so many Montessorians?
No, but I'm thinking, of retiring. But my retirement idea is this, that I will pass on my schools and I'd like to go and work with the Montessori therapy and go around Australia or somewhere and just show people things to do. That would be my retirement plan. So I think that would be fun, actually, meet everyone. So I think that would be a good balance.
Yeah, so retiring by just changing careers.
Has anybody got the work-life balance there?
Any other comments or questions?
Can be negative. I'm interested. Are there usually questions?
I think we're always coming back to the same problem, actually. That's how to get the teachers. And
yes,
this is all.
Absolutely.
And I am actually at the moment just trying to secure everything what is from Home Fray. You probably know this from the Montessori World Education Institute, which is also in Australia. They have a great resource. It's freely available, but their website is a chaos. It's old and probably old-fashioned, but could this be a resource where you could start training teachers?
Can you say the beginning of that? I'm sorry, my screen was like I lost the sound for a minute.
Yeah, no, the resource from the Montessori World.org, from the Montessori World Education Institute, which is also has a part also in Australia. And the main website looks a little bit chaotic because it has, I think, built 2014, what I found out. And since then, probably not much updated besides some commercial stuff, courses. But they have a lot of resources there when you find them. That's not so easy. Yeah, and I'm actually thinking about simply to write them and say, look here, why don't we do this together and we simply set it up as a new website? Because the point is they have so much resources there. They're old, but they're good and they're freely available. And this would be a resource where actually then teachers which are interested in Montessori can even hear a teacher, or actually it's a Montessori guide who has been trained by Maria Montessori, by Margaret Homfray, how she actually is doing the course and how she's introducing the materials. And when we can combine this with how to build actually these materials, so teachers could be equipped with a complete set of basic Montessori, also a full classroom, what she's introducing. I found until now only until lower elementary. Upper elementary I couldn't find videos, but until lower elementary I have quite a lot found. And those videos are available. The only problem is you have to find them. And most people.
Lucette, what do you think about the idea of that Andy often talks about of adult auto education through free Montessori training, free Montessori resources? Do you think that would answer the shortage, the question of how to get more Montessori educators into the marketplace?
If we could mentor people, if people could do a certain amount of training, or if there was a core element of those, and then they were mentored in a classroom by someone who knew what they were doing and had training, I think it would be a bit of a stopgap at the moment. because I can't see any way that we could possibly get enough. I know there's an AMI 3 to 6. I just happen to know that because I was talking to the trainer the other day. I know they're hoping to start a course in September, but they've hardly got any. Well, there might be enrolments. I just get the impression that there would be good if they could have a few more enrolments. But I mean, I suppose there's a cost factor that I can never work out why those courses cost so much.
Yeah, this is a big question. Yeah.
I mean, we paid, back in 1999, we paid $10,000 for our course, and that was to pay an American trainer. And we were always thinking that when we got Australian trainers that the cost would drop, but it didn't. It stayed the same, even though the dollar was like half the value. And
Well,
all things considered, I suppose in nearly 25 years, it hasn't even doubled yet. So it's still a relatively similar. In fact, in real terms, it might be cheaper than it was then. But I remember we had 20 people, 19 in my course, and I know there were quite a few in the couple after that, but then it seems to have dropped off considerably over the time. And maybe but the format's over the holidays, so it's not a bad format to be, fitting in with people's school lives, I guess.
Yeah.
And
Lucette,
then
Cherie is asking, just before we go, maybe we'll go back to MMPI. She's asking, can you please elaborate a little on an MPI and some of the concrete strategies that can be used for neurodiverse children?
who's asking that? Cherie?
Cherie, yeah.
Oh,
Cherie,
so
would you like to come on and elaborate on that question?
so MMPI, do you mean with this course that's coming up, what would they teach you in order to help you in the classroom?
Yeah, I think that's what
Okay,
she's
so
asking.
the course that's coming up now will go over 3 months, and they would be looking at, for the first month, I can send you an outline if Mark can send me your email. I can send you an outline. I'll send you the flyer that's just come in, but the first month is on, is Barbara doing the first month, is on like helping to organise your classroom and movement activities for children that might be on the spectrum. And there's quite a few videos that you can access for that, or if you want to, you can do it synchronous. You can use the synchronous one, but for the asynchronous one, the videos are done. Either way, it doesn't matter. And then there's networking groups. So you'd be part of a group a couple of Saturdays for that month with people in Australia, and you'd have a leader with that group to discuss different ways you could implement those things in the classroom. And then the second month would be about Orton Gillingham, which is working on dyslexia and other language problems, the same sort of thing with the videos, a little assignment, which you can choose to do or not. And then again, meetings with people here that would discuss what's happening in the classroom here, and you might pick up some ideas. And then the second one, okay, I'll send you a flyer too, Susan. And then the third one would be with Michelle Lane, talking about specific ways you can deal, like hand over hand with children with autism, different prompts, different ways you can deal with some of the behaviours, and the same deal with the videos and the chat rooms and the networking. Yeah, I hope that was some sort of explanation. But when I send you the flyer, it's got quite a lot of information in there.
Thanks.
And if we can get even 10 people by next week, by the week after next, we can run a group here that, we can so I probably just need a few more people to start that. And then we don't have to fit in. Thank you. Don't have to fit in with the American. So these are the 2 courses here. So if you look up montessoriforinclusion.org, this information will come up for you on the homepage, and then just click into the one that says Understanding Interventions and Therapies in a Montessori Setting. And that'll go into all the details.
All right, fantastic. Lucette, thank you so much for your time this evening. It was wonderful to chat
you're
with you.
welcome.
I think we could talk for another 3 hours and still.
That's my problem, though. I
not
don't
enough.
stop. Once I get going, that's it. It was nice to talk to you too.
Well, yeah.
Thank you for asking me.
I look forward to getting together at the conference late
Yeah.
October.
Yeah, I hope to see
Sydney.
everybody at the conference. Thank you. All right. Well, good night, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay. Bye, Mark. Bye, Susan.
Bye.